Hey folks, welcome to another episode of the Preparedness Podcast, the podcast that brings you the best in preparedness information. My name is Rob Hannes, and you can email me directly at rob@prepcast.info. You can also find us online at thepreparednesspodcast.com. Follow us on Twitter at Prepcast. Like us on Facebook at Preparedness Podcast. We're also on YouTube, but at this point, it's really just an audio file for the podcast. It makes it easier for some people to listen to the podcast on YouTube because they can do it directly from the browser, and there's not a lot of hunting and pecking to try to find the file on the website. So we're there too. You can check that out as well. This is the final week before the Prepare to Endure Preparedness Expo in Bakersfield, California. I'll be heading out there this weekend. Looks like I'm scheduled to give 3 classes on EMP. Looking forward to that. Also looks like there might be a roundtable discussion going on sometime, I think, at the end of Saturday. Still need some details on that, so I'm not exactly sure, but looks like it's going to be a great expo. Looking forward to meeting a bunch of the listeners. I've had several of you already email me and let me know that you're going to be there, so I'm looking forward to meeting you. If you're going to be in the area or want to pop in, you can find out more about the expo by going to the website preparetoendure.com. That's prepare with the number 2 endure.com. Before we get into the content for today's podcast, I do have a big announcement. I'm excited to finally announce that the Preparedness Capability Checklist is finally available in book form. It's ready to be ordered. I have a blog post, and I've updated the page on the website so that you can find out about it. For those of you that are familiar with it, because it's been around in several different forms, I don't know, maybe past 7-8 years on various websites that I put out there. What I've done is I've tried to take those down because this iteration, this version, is significantly different than the versions that have been out before. It's been completely revamped, retooled. There's a ton of information in here. And if you're not familiar with the Preparedness Capability Checklist concept, what it is instead of having a list that somebody's put together that basically gives you their list, it's a list that they put together that they think they should have, and may or may not do anything for you. For example, if a list has 300 pounds of wheat and you're gluten intolerant, that list item does absolutely nothing for you. Another problem with these sort of inventory lists is that they don't account for any sort of changes in technology. They don't account for any changes in family size. If you start as a single person and then you get married and then you have kids and suddenly you're faced with a family, well, these lists don't necessarily help you with that. So the PCC is designed to not only be a thinking tool that allows you to go through and helps identify those capabilities or those functions or those survival abilities that you need to do in order to survive a disaster or a crisis event. You can also use it as an evaluation tool. So if you're evaluating a bug-out kit or you're evaluating your emergency plan or your get-home bag or whatever, you can go through and you can check to see that you have covered all the abilities that you're going to need to do in order to survive or make it through the situation. Now, this new and improved version that is out and available in book form right now, I have 4 preparedness levels. I have a portable, a minimum, an extended, and advanced level. And they're designed to kind of help you decide how prepared you want to be. For example, if you're looking at a bug-out bag, that's a portable level. You're not going to try to stuff everything in there. You need to accomplish a certain amount of task or a certain amount of capabilities, but you still need to keep it to a point where you can put it on your back and carry it. You can't throw everything in there. And so I've broken it out that way so you can look at this and get a better understanding of what needs to be accomplished at what level. Also, for those of you that are familiar with this, I've redesigned or I've retooled the categories. There used to be 19, now there's only 18. I've kind of combined some so they make a little bit more I think it makes it easy to understand to have certain categories broken out, and so you can focus on just those categories. For example, alternative energy, clothing, communication and computing, defense, safety, and security. And so when you're looking to accomplish these goals, so for example, if you're looking to provide an alternative energy source for you, you can look at it and say, well, what can I do on a portable level? What can I do on a home level? Or what's the minimum sort of requirement that I need in order to consider myself, prepared at a minimum level? And that's what the book is going to help you do. It's going to help identify how you can be prepared. What is it you need to accomplish in order to actually survive? So instead of listing, oh, you need matches, you need a candle, you need a headlamp, you need a water filter. Those things don't actually tell you necessarily what you need them for. This book differs because instead of telling you need matches, the book will say you need to be able to start fire 3 different ways. Now, those 3 different ways can be whatever you're most comfortable with, whatever you're most familiar with, whatever fits your plan, whether it's a bug-out bag or a stay-at-home kit. You decide how you're going to fulfill that need or fulfill that capability. And one of the great things about this concept is that it allows for individual needs while still accomplishing common preparedness goals. Everybody needs to eat. Everybody needs to drink water. But you may have specific needs for food. You may have specific needs for disabilities or whatever. You determine what works best for you, and the book will help you make sure that you're still accomplishing all those goals that you need to do in order to be prepared. So I'm really excited to have finished this. I know it took a little bit longer, maybe a lot longer than I expected, but I think it's worth the wait because there's a lot of good information in here, and I absolutely think that this is going to help people get better prepared. The early reviews that have come back on this are very favorable, so I'm very happy that it's being well received. You can check it out by going to the website. You can read the description, and when you click on the link to buy, you're going to go to a website called The Book Patch. That is where it is being printed. It's a print-on-demand service, so you can order it directly from there, as well as the Surviving EMP book is also being printed through there. And with that, I want to kind of slide right into the topic for the podcast, which is going to be 39 items to always keep in your vehicle. Now, I have done a tip on this very topic, and I thought it would be a good opportunity to talk about this and use this as an example of the kind of tips that I'm putting out for the weekly tips that you can sign up on the website. They're completely free, and basically they're, for all intents and purposes, they're basically article-length tips that get sent to your email once a week. And so I thought we'd talk about this. 39 items to always keep in your vehicle. Just quickly before we get into this, I want to talk about the sponsor for the podcast because once I get into this, I'm likely to forget. So I want to handle it now before we get too much farther. If you've been reading the Prepper News Watch that I put out Monday through Friday on the site, a very recurring theme in the news articles that I'm posting or posting links for is how the economy has pretty much reached a point of no return. There is no easy solution for recovery. We're not seeing a recovery. We're seeing debt and a bubble build up here and a bubble build up there, and we're seeing all these people kind of scramble. And lately, the hinted wire news or the hinted underscore that's happening is that we may very well be close to a collapse. Now, we don't know what exactly that collapse is going to be. We've had several collapses in this country before. There's been many collapses in the world. But one thing that remains consistent is if you have tangible goods, tangible items, you're going to fare better. At some point, you want to be able to have a medium that you can move your wealth into, your savings into, and protect the value of it. And one of those has remained consistent is gold and silver. Now, we may also have some form of wealth preservation with copper and nickel, but at this point, they're still priced pretty low. I think it's a good idea to look into that as far as a way to do everyday transactions, especially small transactions. Copper and nickel are industry metals, and they have value. And both the penny and the nickel, we've seen this with the penny. They're not even made of copper anymore. They're mostly zinc with a copper coating. But nickels are still made of nickel, and we've seen news stories talking about how they're going to get rid of the nickel. I mean, we've seen the signs, we've seen the indication. They've kind of given us pre-notice on this. What does this mean? Well, if you've been following the articles and been looking at the economy and kind of following what's going on, it's pretty obvious that we're headed for some sort of economic trouble, a collapse, a monetary problem, a currency issue. We're looking at this, and what happens is when you have your savings, the savings you have in the bank or an investment, and it's measured in dollars, when those dollars lose value, that investment or that savings also loses value. If you have $1,000, you may pull $1,000 out. However, the chances you'd be able to buy the same number of goods with that $1,000 is not all that likely. That's what happens in inflation. We've seen inflation happen over the decades. It's a slow inflation that eats away our dollar. When you compare to when the Fed was created, the Federal Reserve back in, I think it was 1933, and you compare what the value of the dollar is now, it's like 98% or something like that. It's incredible at how much value we've lost over these several decades. It's continuing to happen. Now, our biggest fear right now is that the inflation is going to increase. You can kind of work around small inflation, but when the inflation gets so high, you're just simply going to lose value. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. Jim Sinclair from mindset.com he came out today and he basically said, get out of the system. For your own sake, get out. And we're seeing the indications. We're seeing the signals that the markets, the economy, the investment holdings and stuff are teetering. I mean, they're trying to tell everybody to get in. But this is exactly what happened when we had the crash and had the recession in 2007, 2008. Is they snookered a bunch of everyday people to spend their hard-earned money into the stock market and into the money markets and stuff while they were getting out because they knew. And that's kind of what we're seeing now. So one way you can protect your wealth and kind of beat this game is with precious metals, gold and silver. They retain their value. They have for thousands of years. I've got a good friend who deals with gold and silver and has for decades now. His name is Jeffrey Bennett. He's got a website, flyingeaglegold.com. He's got a lot of good information on there. You can call him toll-free at 855-289-7587, or you can send him an email at info@flyingeaglegold.com. Jeff has a really great historical perspective on owning gold and silver, and he can explain why it's important, how you can structure your savings, your wealth, and be able to preserve the value that you've worked so hard to accumulate. And when you talk to Jeff or when you email him, let him know that you heard about him on the Preparedness podcast. 39 items you should always keep in your vehicle. I'm going to go over this list, and it's not in any order. And like a lot of the topics I talk about, these aren't absolutes. Everybody has a different situation. If I say you should have a winter coat and you live in the desert and it never gets cold enough for you to have a winter coat or snow boots, then, certainly don't have that. Likewise, if I were to make a suggestion that, well, you should have a quart of water and you're in the desert or someplace where you may be far, far away from another water source, and you may want to carry more water. You have to look at your own individual situation and adapt to your needs. So these are items that when I look at what I want to keep in my vehicle, these are the items that I keep in my vehicle in some form or another. First item I have on the list here is an old cell phone and a car charging cord. Now, even though that phone may not be active, it doesn't have an active wireless account, it doesn't allow you to make phone calls, by law, every carrier has to allow calls for 911 to go through. This means that if you've got an old cell phone, as long as it can still connect to the wireless network, you can make 911 calls, and that charging cord is there because the battery will probably die from in use, and you want to be able to power it up and stuff. So I think that's probably a good way to recycle old cell phones. You can probably even buy them used very cheaply just for this purpose. One of the things that I keep 5 of in my truck are brimmed hats. I keep 5 baseball caps, one for every member of my family, just in case we have to walk someplace. You want to keep that sun off of your head. You would probably be better served by having some sort of bush hat or a floppy hat that's got a rim all the way around, or a sun hat for you women folk, because it protects you from the sun all the way around, not just the top of your head and wherever the brim is. You need water. Keep a minimum of a couple liters of water in your vehicle, and you should rotate it out on a regular basis. You know, water doesn't necessarily go bad, but it can have contaminants. It could have a leak, and you can get some bacteria in there. So you should probably rotate that out maybe every 6 months to a year, depending on, you know, the conditions in the bottle you're using. If you're using a reusable bottle, you probably want to rotate it a little bit more, because unless that bottle is absolutely clean, any little bacteria that may have been on the threads or the cap or inside will eventually start to grow, and so you want to rotate that out more. And of course, you can always recycle your water, put it in your plants. If it's still good, you can drink it. We keep water in our vehicles, and we've used it on several occasions, not because we got broken down, but I remember one case where my father-in-law and my wife were driving around, and he was looking a little bit flushed and a little bit hot, and so, you know, she gave him the water to drink because he looked like he was dehydrated. Now, food isn't as important as water, but sometimes having a snack can give you that boost of energy you need to, you know, walk to the gas station or walk home or change the tire, or just, you know, maybe have something to do. If you're broken down and you're not really sure what to do, maybe sitting down and having a little snack will allow you the time to think what your next step should be, you know, plan out what you need to do. It's sometimes difficult to carry food in a vehicle because it can get hot. Not only here in the desert, but anywhere in the summer, it gets pretty hot in the trunk or in a car with the windows closed. I have found that the compressed food bars, like the Mainstay bars or the Daytrex bars, they are pretty good, or I should say they're really good at suffering heat. They're designed for that. Not everybody likes the taste of them. Not everybody likes how they feel in their mouth. The texture is kind of gritty and stuff. So try to find something that is heat tolerant, and you'll be able to hold that in the car a little bit longer, not have to rotate it out quite as often. You should have a good road atlas in your vehicle. Even with the technology that we have available, you know, you can get Google Maps on just about any smartphone. Apple's got their own Maps app, and there's a ton of GPS apps. You can't rely on that technology being there if you don't have a cell connection, if you don't have an internet connection, or even if your battery just dies. Now what? You need to be able to walk. You need to be able to find out where you're going. You know, walking might take a different path to get someplace faster than what you would have driven. And so having a good set of maps is always a great idea. I remember one time in college, I was going to college in Southern Illinois, and I had a girlfriend that was going to college in Minnesota, and I decided to go see her, and I didn't check the weather reports, and I found myself driving in a blizzard. And I drove in a blizzard for 16 hours. And the only reason I was able to actually get there was because I carried a small folding military shovel. It's one of the old military shovels that had the wood handle. And I was able to fix the shovel in a kind of a 90-degree angle to the handle, and I was able to dig out of the several drifts that I had found myself in by using that shovel. And I was able to do it quickly because of the angle. I'd just be able to get in there and scoop it out and stuff. And I probably had to do it, I don't know, 5 or 6 times because it was a blizzard. It was amazing how much snow was coming down. And, you know, a stupid college kid, I just didn't even think about turning around and going home. I just kept going. But that shovel allowed me to dig myself out of otherwise what would have been me sitting there waiting for help. So a shovel is a great asset. I don't know if you can still get those military style or those military shovels. I still have mine. I love it. It's still in great shape. I also have found there is these little itty bitty like mini spades that you can get at the hardware store. They're only about 2 foot long. Those I think are very handy as well because they're very easy to use in quick, small, tight situations like digging out from underneath your car, digging snow or mud or dirt out from under the car. So I would consider one of those if I didn't have these. But obviously any shovel would be better than no shovel. A shovel is also a good idea to have because it can become an expedient weapon. And in areas where you don't want to carry or you can't carry or the laws are really strict, or let's just say you forgot to carry your weapon that day, a shovel does become a decent weapon. If you live in snow country or travel through snow country, like for example, we certainly don't get snow down here in the Phoenix area, or not enough to really worry about slipping and sliding on the road. But if you do travel, like we can go to Flagstaff and get tons of snow up there, you should carry, at least in the wintertime, either sand or cat litter or some carpet remnants, because if you lose traction, you can gain some traction by using the sand or the cat litter or this car. I like using the carpet remnants because they're reusable. You kind of stick them or slide them up underneath the tire, and the tire will drive up on them, and then you can take them and put them back in your trunk and reuse them the next time you get stuck. Now, some people like to put big bags of sand, big heavy bags of sand in their trunk or in the bed of their pickup for better traction. I don't, and I don't because what happens is, yes, you'll have better traction initially, but if you ever lose traction and start spinning, you're going to make that accident or that spinning worse because there's more weight that's being flung around. So if you can't pick up the back of your truck, it's probably pretty heavy enough, which I would imagine is all vehicles. So I wouldn't really recommend the extra weight for that reason. Now, this next item you could actually use in lieu of a carpet remnant, but I wouldn't really want to, and that's like a blanket, because once you do, I think that blanket would probably be too ruined to actually use if you had to. And blankets are good because if you get stuck, unless you know exactly where you're walking and where you're going and how long it's going to take, chances are you're better off staying with your vehicle until help can find you, or until the weather breaks and you have a clear weather to be able to find out where you are and where you're going. And of course, the blanket is going to help you stay warm. Now, this could also be a sleeping bag or quilts or whatever, but the colder the area you are, the more you need to be able to provide warmth from blankets or sleeping bags, because you're going to be sitting in this very cold iron cage. That's what your car is, and you're going to need that extra warmth so you don't freeze to death. Now, there are a lot of jokes about duct tape and baling wire, but there really is some truth to the old adage of about being able to fix nearly anything with duct tape and baling wire. And it makes good sense to carry some of it in a vehicle, because the duct tape can be used to, if you spring a leak in a radiator hose, you can use the duct tape to kind of seal it up until you can get someplace and get it replaced. If you have a muffler drop on you or something else fall from the bottom of your vehicle that's impeding the ability to drive it. And I've had this happen on a trip. I was far away from home. Me and a friend were on a camping trip. We were tooling around Colorado and Utah in my little mini pickup truck, and the muffler dropped out. And it didn't just drop out where it was dragging from the back. It dropped off in front of the muffler. So yeah, we had this really great throaty sound that everybody could hear. But it was like a straight pipe because it was not that far off of the engine, but it was the back part that dropped down. So it was angling towards, it was like a pole vault, and it was very dangerous. I could see it pushing through the back end or really causing some damage. And so we really couldn't go anywhere. And I had this spool of basically this baling type of wire, and we just strung it up, and we still had the loud noise, but we were able to get on our way without having to worry about causing further damage to the vehicle. Every vehicle should have a set of jumper cables. It's difficult to jumpstart your vehicle without these. I mean, they have some of these these gadgets that plug in from cigarette lighter to cigarette lighter, they don't work that well because you can't push that many amps, and you kind of have to trickle charge your battery, and you got to wait a long time for it to get charged enough to start. You're much better off just jump starting with a set of cables. Some vehicles won't run well or at all with a dead battery. Honestly, I'm not sure if that's still true with modern vehicles. That same mini truck I just talked about, it was poorly made, poorly engineered. It was so bad that if the alternator failed, the alternator stopped charging, the truck would not run on the battery at all. Even though the battery was fully charged, the truck just would not run. It had a relay that needed to be energized by the voltage coming out of the alternator in order to allow the ignition circuits or whatever it was to start. It was a really stupid design, but most cars, I think, will run on just a battery, and a lot of times that's all you need to be able to get to some place where you can get your alternator fixed or replace it yourself. Chances are, if you have a breakdown or some sort of other emergency or situation, it's going to be at night, and so a flashlight is a great idea. A headlamp would be ideal because then that leaves your hands free to do whatever you need to do, change a tire or whatever. You're going to need fresh batteries, and that's the trick with keeping a flashlight in the car, is the heat degrades the batteries. Also, because this flashlight isn't used that often, I'm finding that the new batteries are leaking more. I can't remember when I had so many batteries leak on me in the past couple years. I don't know if it's the new way they're making batteries or what, but general rule of thumb for preppers, or for anybody really, unless you're using the item, keep the batteries out of whatever the device is, and that goes for the flashlight that you're going to keep in your car. And then just put it on your calendar, whether it's your paper calendar in your kitchen or your little digital reminder on your computer. Change the batteries like every 6 months. Just swap out a fresh set of batteries there. That way you always have a good set. And I would also keep a spare, 2 complete changes of batteries for the flashlight. I keep 2 towels in my truck at all times. When we go on trips with the kids, I keep 5 towels. And they're great for all sorts of things, cleaning up after you had to change a tire or do other repairs, or laying down on the ground so you can kind of get on the ground without getting your clothes dirty, or out here in the desert, the tarmac and the ground gets so hot that you can't even lay down to take a look because you're going to burn your skin. The towels can come in handy for that. I also find them handy for kind of an everyday thing. If I'm eating while I'm driving, I lay the towel in my lap, and I'm able to put like food there, and I don't have to worry about spills and stuff. And it's a very easy and convenient way. And plus, it kind of makes a little pocket in my lap so that I don't have to worry about food getting down into the seat and stuff. Just something I have done for years now, and I find it very convenient. Anybody who lives in winter areas probably already have an ice scraper. It's one of those things. When I was living in Chicago, I always try to make sure I had a usable ice scraper at the beginning of the winter, because without it, it becomes really difficult to clear off your windows, and it's very dangerous to drive. And I'm sure we've seen all this, where people, it's like a little 6-inch square that they've cleaned off the snow and ice on the windshield and trying to drive it like they're in a tank or something. That's a good way to get yourself into an accident. But I found that even, and actually I have to check to see if I have one, but every once in a while we'll get a frost down here in the desert area, or even if we go up a little bit north, we get this little bit of frost on the windshield, and it's just thick enough that running the froster, you have to run the froster too long in order for it to start melting. An ice scraper would come in really handy, especially if you're trying to get on the road and go someplace quickly. You don't want to wait 10 minutes for the car or the truck to warm up to melt that ice off the windshield. Most parts of the country get cold enough at night, at the very least, to warrant carrying a glove, scarf, and a warm hat. Now, my wife gets colder than me far more often than I do, and I usually keep the stuff in my truck for that reason, because most likely she's going to need it. We keep stuff in her car because she gets colder faster. But Like I said, we can get cold here at night, especially in the winter. It can get below freezing, not often, but even 35 degrees or 40 degrees can make for an extremely miserable night staying out in the cars, and there's no reason not to be able to have this stuff. Now, I probably should have mentioned this at the beginning of this portion of the podcast and said that, a lot of this stuff is a per person sort of thing. Gloves, scarf, and warm hat really can't be shared among 3 people. Every person needs to have their own in order for them to be effective. And so, if you regularly have more than one person in the car, then you need to have more water, more blankets, etc. A lot of newer vehicles, especially the smaller vehicles, they do come with a spare tire and jack tools, but the tire is like a donut tire. It is emergency use only. If you have one of those tires, make sure that you understand that's not for driving for the next week. That's designed for, I think, 100 miles, or maybe it's only 50 miles. They're not designed to replace a tire. It's designed for you to get back on your way and get some help. Get to the fix-it station, the repair shop, whatever it is, in order to get that tire replaced or fixed. If you can swap out, if you have the space in your car or your truck for a full size, do so. And make sure you check your spare tire every once in a while. Even though that spare tire isn't being used, it's either hanging up underneath the vehicle or stuck in some compartment in the back. It can go bad, whether it's dry rot or if you've never actually tested your spare, it may have never worked to begin with. And the last place you want to find out about this is when you really need it on the side of a lonely, dark, cold, dreary, wet, snowy road. If your normal business attire or your normal work attire is, business clothes, nice suit, nice pants, maybe a skirt outfit, high heels, dress shoes, you should carry a set of clothes and comfortable walking shoes in your vehicle. Now, to be truly prepared, you should also have a spare shirt or something you can change into that is business appropriate. So when you're out, at the Mexican restaurant, you get salsa all up and down the front of your shirt. You can go ahead and change without having to go home and not have to spend the rest of the day look like you don't know how to eat. But it's important if you ever have to walk out. If you get a spare tire, or let's say it's an emergency situation where you have to walk home, you're going to bug back to your house from work and you're in dress shoes or heels or something, it's not going to be very comfortable. You're going to want to at least get into a pair of comfortable walking shoes or hiking boots or something. But ideally, you would also have a change of clothes. Now, some people I know, they have gotten coveralls, like the mechanic's coveralls or like a pilot's coveralls, and they keep that in the car so that if they need to do repairs or change a tire or they need something a little bit more rugged than the business clothes they have on, they can either put the coveralls over what they have, or they can, just simply change into it and use that as their alternate form of clothing. Like a towel, trash bags have hundreds of uses. You can use them from anything from carrying wet clothes to makeshift rain poncho. You can use them underneath your clothes as a vapor barrier for heat retention. You can stuff them, if you're, got them under your clothes, you can stuff them with newspapers or whatever to create more insulation. I mean, there's just, 101 or 1,001 uses for trash bags, and they're not that expensive. I would go ahead and put like a box of the lawn and garden ones in your trunk or in the back of your vehicle so you have it. Pencil and paper is probably not something a lot of us think about anymore, especially with the ease of having voice memos on your phone or be able to take a note or send an email. But it's important because if for no other reason, if you have to leave your vehicle, you should leave a note on the dashboard that basically says, car stuck in snowdrift, heading towards exit 127, Circle K gas station, or something like that, so they know where to find you or they know how to track you down. But it's also useful if you lose the technology of your phone or whatever you have that you normally take notes on and need to take notes about anything, any sort of map notes or information or medical information, or if somebody has a medical emergency, you want to take notes like that so you can let people know how you treated them or what you were doing before the ambulance got there. I mean, there's lots of reasons why you would want to take notes, and having to scramble for a candy wrapper and a piece of chalk isn't really the best way to do it. I keep 2 pair of work gloves in my truck, and it's actually amazing how often I use them. In fact, I just used them today. I met my friend Fred for lunch, and I've been having this issue where I think one of the front tires is starting to go again, and I didn't want to have another issue where I was getting to an accident because the tire blew out. I just went through that, if you remember, not that long ago. And so I had him basically feel the tires. I slowly drove forward, and he was able to determine that there's a flat spot on there. And our best guess is that probably when I had the accident, these tires were on the rear, and I think I just probably wore a flat spot from the brake, because when the ABS got ripped out by the front tire, the tires locked up because the ABS, the anti-lock braking system, was no longer working, and that was another one of those sudden surprises during the accident. But that made me feel a lot better. But instead of him, getting his hand dirty, I pulled out one of my work pair, and he put them on, and he was able to help me out without, getting his hands dirty. But there are a ton of things that I use it for, not just for repairs and stuff. Lots of times I'll help people move something, or I need to do something that's kind of dirty, or move a tire, or whatever it is, and the work gloves come in handy. I actually have one of those pair of those like canvas and suede ones that you can get at the hardware store, relatively cheap. Those are a good pair for just general use, where if you ruin them or something, they're not that expensive to replace. But I also have a pair of nice, I think they're deer skin. I got them from Sportsman's Warehouse. They're kind of elastic on the back, so they're form-fitting, and very nice leather on the front, so they're a little more finger dexterity in there. And I use those too. They can also be used in cold weather or cool weather in a pinch, which is why I keep 2 pair there in case I need to share them. But they're just one of those great things to have in your vehicle. You should have, at the least, a basic first aid kit, a dedicated kit, not one that you take on trips, that your home kit that you take on trips. You want to have one that's dedicated to your vehicle. You should have at least some over-the-counter medications, pain, allergy, whatever. You're going to have to rotate those out because, again, those are heat sensitive. Same thing with like first aid creams or the Neosporin or the triple antibiotic ointment, adhesive bandages. All that stuff is heat sensitive. So you're going to want to either rotate out once a year, like at the end of the summer, like in the case of adhesive bandages or rolls of tape. Check just to make sure that the adhesive is still working pretty well. But you need to be careful, because I've had some band-aids where you check them like, oh, that seems okay, but when you actually go to use them, they don't work nearly as well as they did when they were fresh. While not a perfect solution, having either a Fix-A-Flat or a slime sort of tire sealant is probably a good idea. If you've got just a small flat, this can seal it up and allow you to get to a point where you can get it fixed. It's certainly worth having, because if it works, then you definitely saved a lot of time. Hand sanitizer is one of those items that I'm starting to like more and more. When it first came out, I was happy to see that there was a way to sanitize the hands without having to be near soap and water. But this is not only is it good for using with a towel, you can sanitize your hands and sterilize them with the alcohol, and then if you use a little bit more, kind of like soap and water, but then you use the towel to kind of wipe and get more of the dirt off and the grease in a lot of times. But also it serves as a useful fire starter. Now, it's dangerous in the fact that you can't always see that alcohol flame, but if you were to put the hand sanitizer in like toilet paper or some paper or some lint, or if you scraped your carpet, the car carpet, and got some fuzz, you'll be able to start a fire. The alcohol will burn longer and help get that fire going. In the same token, matches are probably one of the better solutions, or a sparker of some sort, like a flint and steel sort of thing, because butane lighters can evaporate if they're not completely sealed in a high heat environment. The matches and the sparker should last a pretty good long time, especially if the matches are either sealed or protected in some sort of case. Even if you're not mechanically inclined, you should probably carry some sort of multi-tool, like a Gerber or a Leatherman or some sort of one of those pocket multi-tools, in case all you need is a wire cutter or a small pair of pliers or a knife or something. A lot of times all you need is that, and you would have it in that tool. You could carry a toolkit, spare parts, and fluids if you're mechanically inclined, and you probably should, because sometimes it takes just a quick repair. Sometimes it's a matter of having the right tool. I've seen, and I've had it happen to me, where the battery cable has vibrated off. It's come loose, and without being able to tighten that down, you're faced with that constantly vibrating off. And now it's not so bad around town, but I've had it happen to me on a 6-hour trip, and it was quite the pain. So tools would have helped in that situation. Same thing with spare parts, especially if you know how to replace them. But fluids, windshield wiper fluid, motor oil would probably be the first two that come to mind. Transmission fluid would probably also be a good. You never know when you're going to be low enough and need to replace them, and it's far easier to go ahead and replace that fluid when it needs it, as opposed to kind of drag it out a little bit longer, especially if in the middle of nowhere. I did a podcast where I mentioned how easy it was to start fires using road flares. They're great for signaling. They're great for making sure people see that you're on the side of the road and don't hit you. If you're in fog or inclement weather, a lot of times people will follow whatever the lights are in front of them. So if they see 2 red lights, tail lights, or whatever, they're going to follow, assuming that you're on the road. Flares burn in a way that people understand that that's a flare, not a tail light, and they're going to try to avoid that. If you're in a situation where you need fire, whether you're freezing to death, or maybe you've fallen on a lake or gotten wet and you're at risk of hypothermia, you need to get a fire going, I think the road flare is probably the fastest way I've seen to get a fire going. Now, if you find yourself in a ditch or a snowbank or stuck someplace, and the Good Samaritan in the 4x4 truck that stops to make sure you're okay, he could pull you out if he had a tow strap. Now, if you're not carrying one and he's not carrying, you're still going to be stuck. So carry a tow strap. They're not that expensive, and they don't take up much room. And when you need one, all you need is a little pull, and you can be on your way. And the last thing I have on this list is your insurance card and registration, and I would include your AAA membership card to make so you know who to call. Yeah, you can have all that information in your smartphone, but again, if that battery dies or the technology fails or whatever, you're going to have that information and be able to get some help and make that call. Now, I know this list of items seems like a lot and like it would take up a lot of space, but it really doesn't, especially if you store these items in different places in your vehicle. You got a glove box. A lot of times you have places under the seat. You've got the modern vehicles have a lot of cubbies and stuff you can put. You could have a box in the back. So you could spread this out and not really have to take up too much room in your vehicle. But the point is that if you need these items, then these items are there, and that's what being prepared is all about. And having these items available can make the difference between a minor inconvenience and a major event. And a major event can often lead to injury and sometimes death, and that's what we try to prepare for. So this is the list that I had put out on the weekly tip, and this is the type of stuff that you're going to see in the weekly tip. So if you're like, well, I don't know if I should sign up or not, go ahead and sign up. You can always unsubscribe. There's no obligation. It's free. You're going to start at tip number 1. You're going to go through all the tips in order. That way you're not missing out on anything. And it's just good information. And that is going to wrap up this podcast. But before I sign out, I want to ask you a favor. Several people over the past few months have written to ask how they can support the podcast, either through donations or subscription or Bitcoin or something. And I appreciate that. But what I want to ask, the favor, is for you to help spread the word about the podcast. Tell 3 people or everybody that you know that would be, or even possibly, interested in the podcast. Send them an email, call them up, send them a link. Let them know that the podcast is out there. If we can expand the number of listeners to the podcast, that's going to help us the most right now. That is my big push for the summer, is to expand the listener base. And that's why we're going to the Prepper Expos, and that's why we're doing what we're doing, because if we can get more people involved, then we can get more people prepared, and it will be great for the podcast in itself too. So that's the favor I'm asking you. Spread the word. Let other people know that the podcast is out there. And that's going to wrap up the podcast. So until next time, folks, enjoy life and be safe.